but also one that's very metropolitan and diverse at the edge of sort of the Mediterranean and sort of the intersection of Asia, Africa, and Europe. And to try and do work that we think is really critical and useful for people of the region who are trying to present an alternative narrative. How do we talk back to what governments are doing? How do we talk back to the, sort of criminalization of entire populations and marginalization? And that work developed into this project that we're now calling Security in Context, that is meant to sort of do the same work, but from broader perspective than just the Middle East. And as we did more work and some of the work that we were doing became sort of more well-known, I was approached a few years ago by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Would we bring some of the work of the Beirut School to the US to weigh in on debates that are happening in the US about what should US foreign policy be, and what should the US role in the world be, and can we bring a perspective that is sort of grounded in not just what is the US national interest. So I'll stop there because we have a lot to say, and Mwangi and Laura have asked us really two frames that I'd like to situate our conversation in and refer to. The first is, what are the reigning narratives about global conflict that hamper our efforts to dismantle, what are the reigning narratives about global conflict, and how do these hamper our efforts to dismantle and transform and advance sort of an alternative? And second, how has the university or the academy played a role in perpetuating them, and how can we cultivate different imaginaries? And we really thought, given what is happening in our countries, we thought we'd very ground this discussion in the moment. And of course, the moment is always fraught because it's always changing. There are lots of different perspectives on it, so we bring to it our perspectives and our thinking. And I know that my own thoughts are always changing and always shifting, trying to really be in touch with movements on the ground. So with that, perhaps Sanam, you can sort of, it's hard to avoid that there's a mass social movement, often portrayed as led by women, and in fact led by women. And given that's your work and your sort of heritage, would you tell us a little bit about that? How do you see that movement, its trajectory, its dynamic, the social forces that are there, and what is the status quo? Where is it at this point?
Thank you. So, what's happening right now? We have, if you go back, I can go back 100 years and say, and I have to put this in slightly family context as well. My family background is everything. My father's family were super religious scholars. My mother's family were, so Mossadegh was my mother's cousin, so super politicized and the message to us was always, do not go into politics. So I'm a slight anomaly even in my own setting. But so you go back 100 years, we had Reza Shah Pahlavi who came in and he wanted to modernize, and one of the things around modernization was girls' education and taking off the hijab, right? At the time, my grandmother's generation, they all wore it. It was the norm. So it was an uncomfortable moment back in the 1920s. Then you get to when I was growing up during the Shah's time, you would see women in all forms of dress. They could be covered, they could be in a mini skirt. It was kind of, choice had become normalized, at least in public settings. But it was also still a traditional country, so depending on where you went, you had to be conscious of how you dressed and so on. In terms of the law, during the Shah's time, they started to implement certain legislation to try and give greater equality to women. And one of the key areas of law was personal status around marriage, divorce, child custody, and so forth. When that law was passed, it was done in conjunction with the religious authorities of the time. But it enraged more conservative forces. And when you then fast forward to the '79 revolution, there are many forces that led to the revolution. But the question of the status of women and women having this right, and it was presented as, this is destroying family. This is destroying traditional values. That was one of the key instigators of mobilizing people, and it was an interesting moment when we look back, because they went to traditional families and conservative families and to women in these places saying, we have a West-toxified society. When we have morality, when we have a pure Islamic society, you will have your rights, you will have everything that, you know, so come and join this, you know, right now things are corrupt and immoral, later on it's going to be moral. And so they actually mobilized women from the grassroots and so forth to join them. The minute they came to power, the first thing they suspended was the personal status laws. And the first people to feel it and understand it were actually women from more conservative branches of society. Then we had the Iran-Iraq War, where you have hundreds of thousands of war widows, and they then butt up against the new state, and the new state was, the constitution is basically Sharia law. And the interpretation of Sharia law is very much, has been typically, historically, very antithetical to rights for women, so it's very discriminatory against women. For example, if you want to go to a court of law, for each male witness, you need to have two female witnesses. Right? You're considered as half a witness. Now, feminist Islamic scholars have challenged all this, but if you're sitting in Iran, this is the story of, you know, so there are lots of ways in which discrimination is embedded. War widows were the first ones to challenge a lot of these things. And they had a lot of leeway because, of course, there were war widows and they, you know, things like inheritance and so forth. When they came to power in '79, they, and as I say, the ideology of, the identity of this regime is anti-American, anti-Israel, and, you know, the Islamic element is, there's no Islamic banking, it's the social force, and the social force is around the treatment, largely, of how women are treated. So the imposition of the mandatory hijab became something normalized in '79. My mother's generation were out on the streets protesting it, and they faced the call from the regime of Rusari or Tusari, which Rusari means covering, Tusari means either you cover your head or you get hit over the head. So that was, they tried, they failed, they didn't make it. But the resistance was persistent. So you've had generation upon generation. The first time I went back to Iran, only my face could show. It had to be, you had to have black covering, everything had to be big and wide. Students in universities had to have a mavneh, which is like a big covering, and a scarf, and a long coat, and, you know, pants wider than this, and so on. But literally from '86 to '89 to all the years that I went back, the resistance was 1 inch back, 1 inch shorter, 1 inch tighter, 1 inch, you know, the pants were shorter, the sandals. So it was kind of this non-violent resistance and pushback. They tried to stop women going to university, and there was pushback. And one of my cousins, I remember saying, you know, there were certain courses that women were allowed to go into, and then they realized, well, if you really want to segregate society so much, we need female doctors. Right? It's actually the exact conversations that that women in Afghanistan are now having 20 years since the Taliban wants to separate everything, and the women are saying, if you want women to go have medical treatment, but they can't see a man, then they need female doctors, so we need women to go to university. So these types of, you know, contradictions that came about. Anyway, so those fights were won, and in fact, Iranian women are the majority of university students across the country in all subjects, basically. And this pushback sort of continued. And the state would, and there were different strategies. So for example, there was in the early 2000s, there was a campaign, the Million Signature Campaign, that women's rights activists fought to try and get 1 million signatures to change the laws, right? And it was, you know, they would have little books and they would show people, like, you know, for a woman to travel, she has to have her husband's permission. Do you agree with that or not? You know, sign and sign. And, you know, there was pushback against them and so forth. But they brought the issues into a social sphere, knowing that they were highly political and could be highly securitized. So the state was always looking at this and saying, you're you know, challenging state security. And the women were always navigating it in trying to keep it sort of social and political and raising awareness. And so you see that tension between the fight for rights and the identity of the state. And the essence of it being that, yes, if we start to change all these rules, then the state no longer is that state. You know, it becomes transformed into something else. And I think that was the logic for many years of people, whether it's that issue, whether it was the negotiations and trying to sort of come up with a JCPOA to say, can you begin to evolve it and shift it and change it gradually, as opposed to kind of another complete upheaval and revolution and so forth. So fast forward to where we are now, and it's the generation of my children that are out there and younger. And so they've grown up with family and at home where life is completely, private life is one image and public life is something else. And it's a series of factors. You know, there's the economic, the impact of the corruption and the sanctions and everything that's happened, the COVID. There's been lots of things that have been brewing. And then we have this trigger, just like in Tunisia, where you have a trigger, and the trigger was there was an incident in Iran, Iranian Kurdistan, a week before Mahsa Amini's death, and then you get Mahsa being arrested. Probably, I don't think the intent was to kill her, but obviously they are so brutal that this happened, and it just, was just the sort of the last straw essentially, and. It's now, and it's, we have a Persian poem, and it's the story of a little mountain stream that's coming down from the, snow's melted, and it's coming, and it comes across this gigantic black boulder. And it says to the boulder, do you mind if I could, do you mind moving aside a little bit so that I can carry on? The boulder's like, who are you? I'm not gonna move. It's like, do you mind? Anyway, long story short, the little little mountain stream erodes, slowly, drip, 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 erodes and the rock is thrown aside and becomes a massive river. This, to me, is kind of what we're seeing. It's a multi-generational, the dam is burst, people are out there, people are saying what they want to say, and they're done with trying to shift through a kind of a political reform within the system. So that's really the existential fight that is on right now, between a state that wants to keep itself and a public that is saying that system is not working, and we've tried to reform from within, and it hasn't happened. And so on an emotional level and on a personal level, I'm watching this, and it's like you go through this roller coaster of emotion of incredible hope and just in awe of the courage that's on the streets, and then every day you wake up and there's another hashtag with a young name, or another young woman or a young man or high school kid who's been killed, and you just think, what's my role in this, and what do we do out here, and how do we, and the role question is both a question of saying, what can I do, and what shouldn't I do? And how do I make sure that I don't harm the situation? And I say that because, in my organization, for example, I have this network. We work with women all over the world. I don't work with Iranian women because sanctions don't allow it, because in the times that I was able to go back and forth, it was so easy for them to just stitch up a story and claim that I was there doing something, and then get the people on the ground in trouble. So we've, it's to avoid creating harm. I've said, okay, I'm going to work with women everywhere. Somebody else works with the question of what's happening in Iran, or we have to let it be a domestically owned process, and what we can be doing is amplifying what they're doing and what they're saying. But I see the diaspora and the dangers that we have around what happens when it becomes co-opted by the diaspora. And when I think back about the question of Syria, when I started working with Syrian partners, I was working with an organization that they were saying, we're trying to create a space to bring ordinary Syrians to see that they can disagree with each other politically, but they don't have to kill each other, and have spaces for dialogue and disagreement. And we invited them to the US in 2012 and had some meetings for them in Washington. And I remember somebody from the State Department saying to me, this is the first time that we're meeting that we're meeting Syrians who aren't asking for weapons. And that was, and I've seen that, with Libya, we saw Libyan women were out on the streets in Libya. And I was working at the UN at the time and trying to say, okay, who do we need to, there's mediation efforts or whatever, who do you need to talk to? And meanwhile, out somewhere in Washington, somewhere in France, somewhere, all of a sudden, this group was announced as the Transitional National Council of Libya, and they were anointed as the leaders. And it was like, well, what? There's a bunch of men here, and it's the women on the ground, right? So this duality of you see something happening in a country, and then what is the role of the diaspora, and what happens, how much harm can be done, because what I don't profess to know what Gen Z in Iran right now is thinking or doing, or what they should or shouldn't do. That's not my, people have to determine things for themselves. What I know and what I've seen is living in Washington since 9/11, how Washington operates, how the neocon machinery operates, how the weapons industry comes into these spaces, and other forces come into play. So it's like, it's that kind of, that side of the knowledge where you want to say, folks, here's what we know, here's what happens. Just be careful, be aware of how things can get co-opted and so forth. But going back to what's going on in Iran right now, it is a revolution. I mean, it is revolutionary. I don't know, nobody can tell us what's going to happen. And what the most scary part, I think, is that you have a state that has no qualms about how many it kills or how many it detains. It's been like that, but it's historically, but we see it more. And then you also now have a public, these young kids who are